I'm Mark Halpern.
And I'm John Heilman. And with all due respect to Stephanie Rawlings Blake, you had one job.
I hereby call the 47th Quadrennial Democratic National Convention to order.
I hereby call this show to order. We are here at the Wells Fargo Arena in Philadelphia, where the Democratic National Convention kicked off this afternoon. Behind us right now, scenes already of disunity between various factions of the Democratic Party as the gavel has been gavelled in, but you've got chanting Sanders fans chanting Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton's fans chanting her name also. It's already a rocking, raucous, and rollicking convention, and we're just getting started here. Even before we got started, however, the Democrats are dealing with double-barreled controversies. Outgoing party chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz was nowhere to be found when proceedings were called to order just past 4 p.m. By then, Wasserman Schultz had relinquished that honor, the gaveling, to Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake. Wasserman Schultz handed over that gavel under extreme pressure, having been heckled mercilessly at a Florida delegation event this morning by supporters of Sanders, infuriated by the revelations brought to light by the DNC's WikiLeaks email leak this weekend, and insisted that her planned resignation at the end of the week does not go far enough.
A couple hours after that event, Bernie Sanders addressed his delegates at the Philadelphia Convention Center, not far from here, where it was clear that Sanders supporters are not as ready to stand with Hillary Clinton as he is. John, does Clinton and her team have enough in their arsenal to stop these twin controversies which are dominating this day so far from dominating the week?
That is a very large and important question. Look, this is a star-studded lineup, unlike what we saw last week in Cleveland. Just tonight alone, we have, in the primetime hour, we have Michelle Obama kicking things off at 10 o'clock, Elizabeth Warren, the keynote speaker named this morning, and then Bernie Sanders, very important speech in terms of this very question. And then as we go through, we all know Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton. That's a lot of arsenal. That's a lot of firepower. But there's also still a lot of anger, and there's still a lot of upset among a lot of Democrats.
Bernie Sanders said to his supporters for months, say you want a revolution. And now he's saying, oh, no, forget the revolution. Let's get in line. Yep. It doesn't take much in a hall to disrupt the proceedings. Yep. And while Bernie Sanders is going to try to bring people together tonight, the early hours here, what you see in the streets in Philadelphia, the ongoing questions about the emails. Who would have thought on the first day of the Democratic Convention that Bernie Sanders would be a more unifying force for Hillary Clinton than Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Yeah. But that's what we face now. I don't know how they're going to control this tonight, because based on what we've seen so far, the Sanders delegates are not going to yield. Well, especially given the fact that until we get to 10 o'clock, other than Cory Booker, who speaks a little bit before 10, there's not a lot of firepower, right? So you've got hours of potential disharmony until you get to those big progressive speakers. And those four, I'd say, adding Booker onto the big three I mentioned before, this is the progressive night. Right, but if the afternoon's any indication, when Mr. Progressive Bernie Sanders was speaking to the most friendly people to him, they did not yield. And the Clinton people are powerless to whip this in any way. No. The Sanders people in the streets and in the hall, they're not interested in tradition. Right. They're not interested in unity for unity's sake. Right. So it's easy to overstate what the possibilities are. But right now, if you're the Clinton planners of this convention, you have to say that a lot of the bandwidth today and into tomorrow at least going to be taken up with dealing with these twin controversies. Right,
and there's a lot to be said for the analogy in the long run that, like in 2008, a lot of Sanders supporters will come to Hillary Clinton the same way a lot of Clinton supporters went to Barack Obama. But what we're hearing right now is more disharmony on the floor than you heard in the entire time, I believe, at the Denver Convention in 2008.
Hardest thing to deal with in politics is emotion. Hardest thing to stop, hardest thing to harness and corral.
All right. I was there today at that Bernie Sanders event at the Convention Center, where many of Bernie Sanders' delegates were in open revolt against Hillary Clinton. Here's a taste of how they reacted to the mere mention of her name by their hero.
When we began this campaign over a year ago, we were considered to be fringe players by the establishment and the corporate media. Well, a year has come and gone. We're not fringe players anymore. We have got to defeat Donald Trump. And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine. Brothers and sisters, this is the real world that we live in. Thank you.
It really was something over there today. Sanders backers also held a large protest in Philadelphia yesterday, and Sanders' team is urging supporters not to disrupt the convention. But the chair of the convention, Ohio Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, struggled to get through normally mundane convention procedural votes just moments ago because of overwhelming jeers and boos. Mark, can Bernie Sanders get his supporters in line, or are they now a force that is effectively beyond his control?
The early indications are he can't. He had some of his top people along with him at the event that you went to, and they urged people to calm down. Sanders supporters are chanting, "Lock her up," which was considered the most controversial chant at the Republican convention regarding Hillary Clinton. So I don't know how this is going to play out. And again, we don't want to overstate it. There's lots of other things that will happen this week that will be news-making. But the early indications of this hall, you hear now the Clinton supporters tried to chant on behalf of her to drown out the Sanders supporters. Is that a long-term solution, to simply overwhelm them? Well, now we hear the Bernie chants again.
Right.
They are here in numbers, and they are not going to be easily pacified. It'll be fascinating to see if Sanders tonight makes a more direct appeal than he did this afternoon to try to get them in line. But I think some of them aren't coming in line.
It is the case that there are two facts, I believe, that are true. One is that the overwhelming majority, I think, of Bernie Sanders supporters out in the country will end up voting Democratic in November.
No question.
But the people who are here are, you can call them dead-enders, or you can call them diehards or true believers, whatever. They are the hardest of hardcore, not clear that they can be placated. The other thing that's true is that as of this afternoon at that event at the Convention Center, Bernie Sanders' speech was not done.
Yeah.
It wasn't even close to done. And I think that they are adjusting that speech on the fly to deal with a situation that's much more volatile than they expected it to be.
It would be fascinating to see a parallel universe where this convention didn't have the email controversy.
Yes.
Because even though Debbie Wasserman Schultz is gone, that galvanized them.
Oh,
that gave them a weekend to discuss their outrage. Not just the offensive emails written about Bernie Sanders, but the notion that what they said all along, the fix was in.
People have been so dismissive. Some people have been, oh, there's nothing new here. You know, it just proves what we already knew. It has been gasoline poured on hot embers, and the flames have just flew up to the sky. Plumes of smoke everywhere.
The Democratic Party officials apologized that it didn't represent the Democratic Party. But you know what? It did represent the Democratic Party.
100% right.
All right, take a break. When we come back, there's a Russian angle now in our presidential election. Talking about that and more delegate unrest here at the DNC in Philadelphia after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back. We're talking now about one of the two extraordinary stories here today. Dexit, that is, the soon-to-be former DNC chairwoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and her exit. It was an emotional day for the DWS and for her detractors. First came that Florida delegation event this morning that we talked about, where the chairwoman was interrupted and booed by her own state citizens as she tried to speak.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. We've had 3/4 of the deficit reduced under President Obama.
We want to actually unite the party. All we're asking for is the person who resigned in disgrace to leave the room. That's all we're asking for.
So that was the first event where a prominent speaker was basically shouted down. Then came Bernie Sanders. He's long been critical of Wasserman Schultz and her leadership, has called for her to resign. This afternoon, he took a victory lap while addressing his delegates here in Philadelphia.
As I think all of you know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned yesterday as chair of the DNC. Her resignation opens up the possibility of new leadership at the top of the Democratic Party that will stand with working people. And that will open the doors of the party to those people who want real change.
Late today, Wasserman Schultz gave up the last role that she had clung to, opening up and closing the convention. As recently as this morning, though, the Clinton campaign was still defending the decision to keep Wasserman Schultz involved in this week's proceedings. Here's Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook talking about the looming resignation of Wasserman Schultz at Bloomberg Politics Breakfast this morning, hosted by Al Hunt.
You guys wanted her to step down, right? You're for the fact that she stepped down.
It was her decision to step down.
But you're for it. You support it.
It was her decision, and
understood. But you're fine with that decision. You're fine with her not being chair.
We told her that was her decision to make, and we're going to support what decision she makes.
So if it was right for her to step down, why is it right for her to stay on the convention stage, and why is it right for her to have a role in the campaign going forward?
I think the chairwoman, as I said, has served for 5 years. She's put in a lot of work. She's going to be gaveling in this convention, and I think that speaks for itself.
And the role in the campaign going forward?
She's absolutely going to have a role. She is one of the most prominent Democratic elected officials in Florida. Which is one of the most important states in this contest, and we're absolutely going to need her help.
There continue to be disruptions on the floor here. The early moments of the Democratic convention underway. Bernie Sanders supporters continuing to chant on a regular basis, and you can hear that, and we'll keep following that. So, John, did the Clinton campaign, by letting this drag out all weekend, by only cutting Debbie Wasserman Schultz out of the proceedings at the last minute, did they mess this up?
I'm fond of nuance, and occasionally I indulge in equivocation. In this instance, I will do neither. Yes, they messed this up completely, and you could see from that conversation I had with Robbie Mook today that he was half-hearted about it. There's no love, really, among most Clinton people for Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
To be honest, no one in the party, at the White House or in the Clinton operation, much liked her. They just didn't want to get rid of her before this weekend. But the fact that they held open the possibility up until late this afternoon.
It's crazy.
No, there was no. If she gavelled the proceedings and given what we've seen happen here,
there would have been a riot.
There would have been a riot.
There would have been a riot. And I asked. I kept trying to get Robbie on this point. She's still supposed to have a role in the campaign going forward. I get Debbie Wasserman Schultz is a good fundraiser. She's raised a lot of money. Only thing she's done well as chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee. But this was inexplicable to me, and I could not, either in private conversation or in public conversation, get a convincing answer as to why they were doing it.
I will tell you what one Democrat said to me in a previous round where there was an effort to force her out.
That they're drunk?
They're afraid of her. They're afraid of what she'd say if she were cut out. That's what they've said. Yeah. They're afraid of what she'd say.
Wow.
Because they think if she was taken out, she did not want to give this up. And someday someone will write a great book about how it is that they got her to give up the gavel.
Man. All right. Our next topic involves another bit of strangeness, a Cold War cyber cloak and dagger subplot to this whole DNC email scandal. Today, David Sanger in the New York Times reported that researchers believe that 2 Russian intelligence agencies were behind the cyber attack that obtained those emails, the ones causing so much havoc here right now. You can hear it still behind us, all of them raising questions about whether Russian authorities and maybe even Vladimir Putin himself are trying to meddle in the United States election. That is the theory that Clinton's campaign has been floating consistently for the past 2 days. We heard it again from Robbie Mook this morning at that very same Bloomberg Politics breakfast.
What the experts are telling us is two things. First of all, that the hack into the DNC was perpetrated by Russian state actors. And second of all, considering the calculated release of these emails and the fact that it was Russian state actors that had the emails, the experts have been inferring that it was the Russians who perpetrated this leak for the purpose of helping Donald Trump and hurting Hillary Clinton. Again, that's not my point of view. That is what experts are telling us.
So earlier today, Donald Trump dismissed this whole notion on Twitter, his favorite medium, writing, quote, "The new joke in town is that Russia leaked the disastrous DNC emails, which should never have been written, parenthetically stupid, because Putin likes me," end quote. The FBI has since announced that they are launching a probe into this cyber attack. So, Mark, my question for you is, what are the implications, you think, of this Russia angle?
Well, look, the Russians are aggressive hackers, but the DNC obviously did not have a sufficiently protected system, and they have to live in fear that there are going to be more coming out, which has been threatened. It gives the Democrats a talking point. It gives them a way to try to create misdirection, and it does raise the obvious, international notion of the Russians trying to interfere with the outcome of our election. So it's a huge story, but it doesn't take away from the fact that the DNC did a horrible thing.
Well, put that aside. We're moving on to the new topic now. It seems to me, on the basis of what Sanger and others, Washington Post and others have reported, is that there's a pretty credible case to be made that Russia did this. The timing, prima facie, is they're trying to meddle. And the truth is, Donald Trump has praised Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has praised Donald Trump. Paul Manafort has worked for the Russian-installed head of the Ukraine. I'm not saying there's coordination going on, but it's clear that Putin, at this moment, prima facie, would prefer Trump to win than Clinton to win. He said so.
Hillary Clinton was for the reset.
Well, but Putin has made his position clear. It seems to me that is what's going on. You can't blame Trump for it as if they're colluding, but I think there's a pretty good argument that this is what's happening.
All right, we're going to be talking about that story again before too long. Up next, Bernie Sanders' campaign manager, the calm and calming Jeff Weaver, joins us next. We're going to ask him to preview Sanders' speech and tell us what the heck's going on the floor right now, right after this. the
She was
debate.
City of Brotherly Love is sweltering today with temperatures in the mid-90s and a humidity of well over 100%. Joining us now to talk about this hot mess of a convention rollout, Bernie Sanders campaign manager Jeff Weaver. Jeff, thanks for stopping by. I have my gavel, and I'm going to hit you if you don't answer honestly for once. We talked over at that convention event. You said, a lot of Sanders people are going to be for Hillary Clinton. At this convention, are these guys still within your control, Bernie Sanders' control, your campaign?
Well, no one's under anybody's control.
Well, to get them under control in the sense that, like...
Well, it's going to be it's a Democratic convention. It's going to be a raucous convention. It's going to be great. We're going to come out unified. We're going to beat Donald Trump. We're going to elect Hillary Clinton. We're going to go forward.
If Robbie came to you and said, so far in the floor, there's been a lot of chanting of Bernie, booing of Hillary. It's by your people. We know you can't control them, but what can you do to help us?
Well, we certainly have told everybody that we hope that they will act respectfully. I mean, we've sent them emails and texts and encourage them to, act with a certain level of decorum.
Right. Well, but they haven't so far, right? I mean, this is disruptive of how the Clinton team would like this to go.
Well, I haven't been on the floor yet.
Well,
but
they're loudly chanting for Bernie and against her.
And we're chanting "lock her up" earlier today, so
Well, I certainly don't condone that.
But can you do anything to quiet your people beyond sending them texts, or no?
Well, I think as the convention goes on, I think as people get more into the spirit of unity, I think you'll see a change in tone.
Well, but again, just to go to the broader question, I mean, I do think it's.
Anything, Mark?
I don't.
Oh,
not based on what I've heard so far.
I mean, there was a time when Bernie Sanders was the leader of this movement, and I think this is a different way of asking the same question.
Sure.
Is the movement now out of the barn door? There's not a movement with a leader anymore. This movement now has a life force of its own.
Well, it certainly does, and always has. I mean, Bernie Sanders didn't create the movement. The movement was people in this country who were upset about the status quo, about income inequality. But he did galvanize it, yes, and he became the face of the movement. But as he said, this is never about one candidate or one campaign.
So what does it matter if he endorses her tonight? If the movement now has a mind of its own, what does it matter?
Well, I certainly think he's extremely influential with the people who had supported him, and I think that the fact that he is supporting her, that he has laid out the case about why we need to support Hillary Clinton and work for her and defeat Trump, I think is very persuasive with many people.
The speech we know isn't done yet, so it's a bit of a moving target. Right. But are you adding things now to try to deal with the reality of what happened to Senator Sanders this afternoon, what's already happened in the hall?
Well, I think Senator Sanders, as you know, writes speeches up to the last minute. So I'm sure it will incorporate current events.
But is he aware of the fact that this is unexpectedly volatile? I mean, he saw it with his own eyes this afternoon. But
sure, I wouldn't describe it as unexpectedly volatile, but I wouldn't use that characterization.
Is he expecting, when he goes out on stage tonight and says what he said today to the delegates, where I was present, when he says, I endorse Hillary Clinton, you should support her and Tim Kaine, that there will be half the convention hall booing?
No, I do not.
You don't think that'll happen?
No, he does certainly not expect that to happen.
Why?
Absolutely not.
Really?
Why? On the basis of today, it seems obvious to me that it will.
Well,
I'll bet you a copy of Superman #1.
Oh, that room today was not just delegates. It was delegates, and there were other people in there as well. So I think the delegates are a subset of the people in that room.
Do you feel as though his endorsement of Tim Kaine yesterday was wholehearted?
Well, I think it was an honest endorsement of Tim Kaine. I think it is extremely important to point out that for whatever reservations people have about Tim Kaine on his worst day, as the senator said, he's to paraphrase, 10 million times better than Donald Trump and Pence. So, yes, I did.
Right, one thing we like about you is you're a pretty pacific guy. You're pretty calm. You don't, But I'm trying to get a sense of how you feel about what's going on here, where your supporters are threatening to disrupt at least part of the convention. Are you indifferent? Are you sad? Are you angry?
No, I'm
confused. What emotions does that inspire?
I'm always calm on the outside.
Yeah. All right, what's going on inside?
Well, I hope people behave respectfully.
No, but how do you feel about it?
Well, I hope people behave respectfully.
No, that's not how you feel.
Are you in turmoil?
Are you proud?
Are you happy?
I'm serious question. What do you feel about it?
No. Well, I feel like I wish people would act with some decorum. That's what I feel like, and I'm going to try to make that happen.
I think probably you're mostly hungry.
Well, I'm a little hungry. I'm not going to say that's not true.
Is there a role for Senator Sanders here this week after tonight?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think yes, absolutely.
What will that
Well,
consist of?
I think it is part of this unifying function that he's going to be playing and bringing the
What
party
will he
together.
be doing day to day after tonight?
Well, I think he's going to be meeting with different delegations. He'll certainly be speaking at delegation breakfast all week, meeting with different groups of people. So
he built an extraordinary grassroots fundraising mechanism in the course of this nomination fight. Will he be putting his full shoulder into using that fundraising, those lists, and the mechanism that he built to try to raise money for her?
Well, I think there's some discussions now about, what that'll exactly look like.
Well, please enlighten us as to where those discussions stand. What's he going to do?
I hate to talk about discussions before they're complete.
Where will they end up?
You never know where discussions are going to end up.
Well,
I hate to talk about them in the middle.
What are the areas under discussion?
Well, I think, they would like him to obviously send some emails to their list and other lists to help.
Why wouldn't he do that if he endorses her for
Well, I don't know that he won't.
Well, why hasn't he already said he would? Why isn't he already on board? I don't understand. He's going to endorse her tonight wholeheartedly.
You're just not a good negotiator.
They're not saying boo, they're saying weave.
Well,
exactly.
What else? What's there left to negotiate for, Jeff? He's for her now, right?
He is for her, yes, absolutely.
So again, why is he withholding this one really valuable piece of his?
No, I don't think. That's your characterization of withholding.
You just told me I wasn't a very good negotiator.
Every time Secretary Clinton is mentioned, your people are booing. Is that going to continue throughout the 4 days?
Well,
or do you think it ends tonight?
I would hope not. Yes.
If you really, let me give you a tip. If you really want to make people think he's for her, like actually agree and raise some money for her.
Right.
Okay. All right. Jeff Weaver. Thank you for coming.
Come back tomorrow.
I'll come back
every day for the rest of the
Right, like a torture.
Coming up, we got Harold Ford of the Big Mo. We'll talk to two Democratic powerhouses about what to expect tonight. Up next.
Welcome back to the fractious, raucous Democratic Convention here in Philadelphia. Here to talk about the rocky start. Convention has gotten off to Mel Lathy, the former DNC communications director. He was also the traveling press secretary for Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2008. And pretty darn close to Tim Kaine, who officiated at his wedding, for instance. He is now the executive director at Georgetown University's Institute of Politics. Also with us, former Congressman, Clinton supporter, Harold Ford Jr. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Professor.
I too am married, but Senator Kaine didn't do my
Professor Ford, how would you summarize to Dutch tourists what's happened at the convention so far? Just tell us what happened today.
Politics in America is a little raucous. I'm not as discouraged by this as some may be, or some may think I should be, largely because I think the passion is there. I do think, and I'll let Mo say it, he will say it even better than me, I think the change in the party leadership has been a positive thing. And I think you see a lot of raw emotions on the floor. But this is early. Let it all get out today. We'll have a great night tonight. Michelle Obama, Cory Booker, Senator Sanders. And we'll move right into the rest of the week. But it's certainly been a little different, a little unconventional imposition on a convention as we've had now in the last 2 weeks.
Mo, you worked for Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the Democratic National Committee. Her departure is unprecedented, I think, on the eve of a convention, a party chairman being tossed out on her ear, basically. Good for the party, bad for the party? What impact on the party and on Hillary Clinton's prospects?
Yeah, I think it's only upside for the party at this point. There'd been growing dissatisfaction from about all quarters of the campaign for quite some time now. But I think the news, the email dump over the past weekend and the way it was handled really sort of put the fine point on that dissatisfaction. And, you know, it was becoming too much of a distraction. And so stepping down eliminates that distraction even before the convention gets started. I thought it was interesting when she said that she would step down but still speak.
Is interesting a euphemism?
Interesting and unrealistic.
And I think what happened to her this morning at her own home state delegation breakfast probably went a long way in convincing her that this may not be the best idea.
If the Clinton folks said to you, Mo, we got to stop the booing every time Hillary Clinton's name is mentioned, what ideas would you have to try to make that happen?
Look, I worked for Hillary Clinton 8 years ago. I remember going to the convention in Denver. Harold and I spent a lot of time together there as Clinton people. There were a lot of our compatriots who went into that convention saying they didn't want to support Barack Obama.
Did they boo him on the floor?
They didn't boo him on the floor, but there was a lot of distraction. There was a poll that showed 40% of our supporters said they weren't going to.
It seems to me the booing is going to be a story till it stops.
I think tonight is going to be an important night.
Yeah.
Right? Tonight you have 4 incredibly energizing Democrats. You know, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are the lions of the progressive left. You've got Cory Booker, who is seen as sort of the next generation of that movement. And you've got Michelle Obama, who doesn't like Michelle Obama, right? The 4 of them standing up and making a case for unity. It's not going to stop everyone from booing. It's not going to convince all the Bernie supporters to come on board, but it will be an important message. And if they make the case tonight that the stakes are too high, we cannot allow Donald Trump, and here's why you can support, here's why you can trust Hillary Clinton and why I will trust Hillary Clinton to carry our banner moving forward, I think that is an important step.
Harold, I want to ask you this question because we discussed it earlier. It seemed obvious to me that the Clinton campaign, which forced her out basically, should have just forced her all the way out over this weekend, made her resign on the spot, not let it drag out in this way. What possible reason did they have for letting her continue to, at least ostensibly for a time, gavel the convention in, gavel the convention out, and hold this job for a week and have a speaking role?
Look, I agree with you. You sound incredulous about how this could have happened. I happen to agree with you. There's no, in my mind, I've had differences with the chairwoman, but she was the chairperson. You went along with that. I thought she should have been moved on from the very beginning. If you say you're going to move someone out, don't wait for them to speak. Don't let them gavel. But look, markets have a funny way of handling things. And this morning she faced the market at her own delegation meeting, and it pushed her out. I think now we have to move beyond her. This is about introducing our candidate and reintroducing our ticket, including Tim Kaine, to the country, laying out why we will be change agents, laying out why this party is best positioned to do many of the things that Mo touched on. And frankly, a lot of the booing out here, they want change. The passion there, I like. I'm not as concerned about this as some people are, largely because I think we're going to translate this into not only a profound energy for the fall, but a profound victory for Democrats in the fall as well.
Remind me when you left the DNC.
Just over a year ago.
Just over a year ago. So when the debates were being scheduled, there was a lot of controversy over the question of whether they're being done to favor Hillary Clinton by putting them on nights, limiting the number and putting them on nights with low viewership. Now that we know that the DNC wrote emails negative about Senator Sanders, showing their clear favoritism, you think they wrote emails about rigging the debates for Hillary Clinton?
Look, I think the debate thing is one of the more complicated things that any party has to undergo.
I don't know. More debates. Martin O'Malley wanted more debates.
Everybody, I have never, in 20 years as an operative who has negotiated debates at every level of government, haven't seen a case where the front runner wants fewer and the underdog wants more.
But the DNC gave in to the front runner.
Well, they did 6.
To answer my question, do you think it's possible, given what they were putting down, that they put down in the emails things about their debate strategy? Think it's possible?
I don't know. I don't know. But look, here's the thing, right? I think with her moving on, This is what the Sanders people wanted, and frankly, it is what a lot of Clinton people wanted.
And
At
Obama
the end
people.
of the day, and the Obama people, her final act as chair may end up being one of the greatest contributions to party unity at this convention.
I want to stick with you, though, on this question. Given that that's true, and that in the course of my reporting over her tenure, that it was very hard to find almost anyone in the Democratic Party who would say nice things about her. How did she survive so long? What was the key to her durability?
Look, it is a thankless job. No, I mean, it is the worst job in politics. I feel bad for her. I felt bad for Tim Kaine, who preceded her. I feel bad for Reince Priebus over the GOP. It is a thankless job. People are sniping at you from every corner. It was much more acute with her. But she is, I will give her this, she is one of the most tireless, hardest working people, and she did have some goodwill amongst the grassroots. And I think that helped carry her as long as it did. She was also one of the longest serving chairs in party history, and I think that worked against her at the end of the day.
Is Congressman Elijah Cummings pretty well liked within the Democratic Party?
Well, it seems like he's liked amongst his crowd right here. I think
He was just heckled.
Well, he got a good reaction. I heard some
He got some
positive.
good reaction, but he also got heckled. If you say you're at the Democratic Convention and Elijah Cummings being heckled, what would you say that foretold?
The night's gotten off to a tougher start than I probably would.
Harold says it foretells energy and positivity in the Democratic Party.
But again, I think people are, to Mo's point, this is a uniting moment. Whatever you think about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it was time for her to move on, and it's now time for this convention to get off to the start. I give this night a night to get past it and move on right to Tuesday and Wednesday for our nominee on Thursday.
We shall see. Harold and Mo, optimists at heart. Thank you both. Thanks. When we come back, what Donald Trump's up to this week while we're in Philadelphia. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
That was a clip of Mark's interview with Donald Trump for the episode of The Circus, our Showtime documentary series in conjunction with Bloomberg Politics that premiered last night on Showtime. Trump and his team have made it clear that they do not intend to concede the spotlight to Clinton world this week. Trump is campaigning with Mike Pence in North Carolina today and participating in a Reddit Q&A, Ask Trump Anything, on Wednesday, among other sundry events. The Republican nominee is also touting some new polls. A CNN ORC national survey shows a 10-point swing in Trump's direction over the past 10 days. He's now leading Clinton 48% to 45%. That change comes almost entirely from independents. Now, if true, this is a pretty healthy post-convention bounce, but there are some questions about how real it is. CBS has a new poll that shows Clinton and Trump still tied at 42%, the same margin as was the case with that poll before Cleveland. Trump's also been tweeting during the Democratic National Convention tonight, quote, "While Bernie has totally given up on his fight for the people, we welcome all voters who want a better future for our workers." And Clinton betrayed Bernie voters. Kaine supports TPP, is in pocket of Wall Street, and backed Iraq war. Joining us now from across town at Le Meridien, that hotel, is Republican strategist Kim Alfano. Kim, I know you have become sort of a nose-holding Trump supporter. When you watched Cleveland play out, you thought what?
Wow, this is exciting. I haven't stayed awake for a convention on TV for my entire life. So I liked the show. I liked what they were able to do. I thought the family did really well, and I think it was more entertaining than politics has been for a very long time.
Kim, you've looked at what has happened so far here at this convention. Just from a political professional point of view, does the Democratic Party wants to control the message over these 4 days seem like it's in trouble, or this is just a minor flap?
Oh, I'm thinking they're in trouble, but I think they kind of tried to take a page out of our own playbook, but they're not doing it very well because they're not going to have a good outcome from this one. The difference between the two is at our convention, our outsider triumphed. At their convention, this is the establishment crushing the outsiders at every turn, and it's more insidious. I mean, we had silly things that happened at our convention that made news for no good reason. They have some really serious endemic problems. And these guys, the populists, so they say, the progressives, have turned out to be the most establishmentarianisms that have ever existed.
As John read some of Donald Trump's tweets, it's clear that his campaign is still trying to take advantage of the disunity here. Talking to Sanders supporters in Philadelphia, as throughout the year, you get a mixed sense, but not very many of them seem attracted to Donald Trump. Do you think it's realistic for the Trump campaign? Is it wise for them to continue to try to appeal to Sanders supporters?
Absolutely. I think one thing Donald Trump has done is broaden the appeal of the Republican Party. We had our first gay speaker at a Republican convention. We've expanded our tent. I think the leader of the party at this point has expanded the tent. And I think, we did a RABA research poll, bipartisan poll, that showed him get a 7-point bump out of the convention. The bulk of that bump came from young voters. That's Hillary Clinton's supposed, or those are Bernie Sanders voters. If they are peeling off of Clinton before today, that poll was taken the day after the convention. If they're peeling off back then, imagine what we're gathering up today and in the next couple days as they continue to falter.
Kim, let me just ask you a question about Donald Trump's speech last Thursday, because people are still talking about that. You're a relatively sunny, optimistic person. Did you think that Donald Trump sketched a vision of America that you recognize, or that it was maybe a little more pessimistic than the America you see?
Listen, these are serious times. I am an eternal optimist. I have a sunshiny heart, but I also realize serious times require serious leaders. And I think the appeal of Donald Trump is that he's, if I can say it on TV, he's a bad A. He's a badass. He gets, people's attention. And I think we're all a little nervous about things that are happening in our country right now. And we don't want a wishy-washy establishment president, not someone who's done what's happened for the last 8 years. So I think in terms of that, I was optimistic because of that.
Right. Kim Alfano, just for future reference, you can't say badass on our program. It sounds a lot better than bad A. But thank you for coming on, and we'll have you back soon.
Sorry, I said
when
it,
we come
though.
back. You did. When we come back, we will go into labor. Union presidents Richard Trumka of the AFL-CIO and Lily Eskelsen Garcia of the National Education Association. Join us when we come right back.
Now the president of the National Education Association here with us, Lily Eskelsen Garcia, and the president of the AFL-CIO, Richard Trumka. Pretty raucous down there. What do you think of what's happened so far with the Bernie supporters?
This is what democracy looks like. It's messy, and people have opinions, and this is where they can express them.
So all good with you if it continues like this?
What we're going to see is people coming together more and more. There's a lot of raw feelings right now, and this is the first day. I think you're going to see something very different, and at the end of this 4 days, you are going to see a very unified party behind Hillary Clinton, and we are going to win.
What reason do you have to think, I know you're an admirer of Senator Sanders in the campaign he ran, but what reason do you have to think that in this convention, not in the long run, not over the election, but here at this convention, that Sanders delegates and other supporters are going to not be disruptive all through the entirety of this convention?
Well, first of all, I talked to Bernie himself, and Bernie's committed to supporting Hillary and supporting her actively. Second of all, look, you got two choices. You got Trump and you got Hillary Clinton. And for working people, there is no choice. It's a Hillary Clinton decision. So the Bernie people are far, 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 far closer to Hillary than they are to anybody else. And eventually, we're all going to come together. Bernie's going to tell them, hey, look, we're all together. We're all in this because we all have to beat Trump.
Let me ask you both a human question. I've never spoken in front of this many people and gotten booed. I'm wondering how you so far pretty much every speaker's being booed. How do you prepare to go up there and talk and potentially get booed?
You just go up and talk and say what you're thinking. You got it in your heart. It doesn't matter. Look, I've been in the minority a lot in my life. When I was fighting against or for civil rights, when I was fighting against apartheid, we started out in the minority. We kept fighting and fighting, and people booed you, but you still kept going because you believed in what you're saying.
Are you going to change your remarks in any way or ad-lib if you're booed?
Oh, heavens, no.
Just going to plow through.
Oh, heavens, no. I mean, like I said, I taught sixth grade in Utah. This is just an overcrowded class of sixth graders. You know, any group is. You have to say what's important. And you hope that people will be respectful. If they choose not to be, it can't mean that you change something that you were going to do. You have to go forward with telling the truth. And the truth is, I'm an educator. Hillary Clinton, from the time she graduated from law school, was working for special ed students, was working on affordable college, was working on all the things that I get up in the morning and have for breakfast. And we know that we have a great advocate and a warrior for students and for their families and for communities. So why would I change a word of what I'm going to say? It's the truth, and we'll say it as loudly and as often as possible. But like I said, I think this whole group is going to feel more and more the choice that we have before us as a country. Donald Trump, who stands for nothing that working people should be applauding, and Hillary Clinton, who's got a track record that she should be proud of, that we're all proud of.
Now, we are just hearing on the floor, Ben Jealous, the former head of the NAACP, is down there getting a relatively large round of applause for a lot of things he's saying. It's increasingly, it sounds to me, and I know this is just a couple hours that we've been here, but it feels to me like the energy, the passion, the volume is all with the Sanders supporters right now. I know there's been some Hillary chanting down there too, but these Sanders supporters are right now providing all the energy.
That's great. We will take the energy and we're going to channel it, because after this convention is over, after all the hooting and hollering is done and all the platforms are adopted and all the speeches are given, we have an election to run. We're going to need that energy. We're going to need the grassroots support and the grassroots energy that they did so well with, and they're going to bring to the general election.
Is the departure of Debbie Wasserman Schultz a unifying or a disunifying factor for the party?
I think the right thing happened, and I think that removed something that was going to get in the way of the message that this entire convention wants to deliver, and that is what Hillary Clinton stands for. And so that's allowed us now to move forward, and that's what we need to do.
What is the chances that some of your members are going to defect and vote for Donald Trump?
Oh, we have some that every election that vote Republican. There won't be any more this time than there were.
No more than Mitt Romney got?
No, he won't get any more than Mitt Romney, maybe less. Because when we give them the facts about Donald Trump, that he thinks our wages are too high, that he thinks Carl Icahn, for God's sake, would be a great Treasury Secretary, that he's 100% for right to work, that he sends all of his products out, and he thinks that outsourcing is a good thing. He taught that at Trump University. Maybe that's why Trump University didn't do so well. But all of those things, they come back across the bridge, and they're going to support Hillary, who is really our champion right now.
And you forgot to do the air quotes on university, which is part of the registered trademark. So yes, the Trump University. And for my educators, I have plenty of Republican members of the National Education. So I'm from Utah. Most of my Utah members are Republicans. I have never seen my Republican members so repulsed by a candidate like they are repulsed by Trump. They are appalled by the things that he says. Most of our schools just need some common sense applied, and to have someone who is so radical and so hateful in his speech is actually something that is affecting Democrats, Republicans, and independents.
President Garcia, President Trump could break a leg out there. We will not boo you. So if you hear boos, they're not ours. Thank you both.
I'm going to be watching carefully up in this booth, honestly.
Okay. We'll be right back.
So make sure you check out BloombergPolitics.com for full Democratic convention coverage by our team here in Philadelphia tonight. Coming up on the television set, Bloomberg West has Yahoo CEO Marissa Mayer. Mark and I, are high in the skybox above the floor, and it is really rocking and rolling down there. We're going to have a great night tonight, and we will tell you all about it tomorrow. Until then, sayonara.
I'm Matt Miller. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's start off with a check of your first word news. In Philadelphia, controversy on the first day of the Democratic National Convention. Democratic Party Chief Debbie Wasserman Schultz has stepped down following a cybersecurity breach that revealed committee staffers favored Hillary Clinton and tried to undermine Bernie Sanders. Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake gavelled the convention to order just after 4 p.m. today, and the theme tonight is United Together. The Dems are kicking off the convention with the primetime lineup of some of the party's heavy hitters. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren will deliver the keynote address. First Lady Michelle Obama and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker are also going to speak. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is going to speak as well. Meantime, a new poll indicates Donald Trump may have benefited from the Republican National Convention last week. The latest CNN ORC national survey has the real estate magnate leading Hillary Clinton 44% to 39%. The Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson has 9%. CNN says Trump got a boost from independents. And 7 Russian swimmers have been barred from the upcoming Olympic Games. That's following recent allegations of doping and a cover-up by Russian authorities. The country's entire team has already been blocked from participating in this Summer Olympics. Global News 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Matt Miller. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, a historic tech deal marks the end of Yahoo as we know it. We'll hear from the CEO, who's been in the hot seat herself, Marissa Mayer. Plus, a fresh cyber scandal on the